All right, so I'll call the meeting to order. So we do have a quorum, and we have a quote guest, a guest member, I guess is what we'd have to call Julie at this point. But she keeps showing up, so I think she wants to stay. So that's good. That's a good sign.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Mary, are you or I taking minutes?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Mary's going to hope that you are, Mike.
You know, I don't want to be miserable about it, but
No,
I get to do this every month, but not for long.
oh, Mike, oh, Mike.
Hi, Molly. So Michael, your house is on the market?
Officially, as of Friday, it'll go on open house on Saturday.
Oh, okay. And
Okay,
has anyone heard from Janet? Do we know if she'll be attending?
I don't know, Stan. I haven't heard a thing. Mike, I can do the minutes.
Yeah,
this
I
month.
haven't.
I'll do the minutes.
I'm in the middle of doing them now.
All right, then I'm too late.
You're off the hook. How about that? Girl, you are off the hook. Yeah, I mean, we might as well stick the job to Michael since he's going to be leaving us. So
I may leave you sooner.
Hey.
yeah. Oh no, you've already promised us you're staying. You didn't put any constraints other than selling your house on there. You didn't say anything about minutes.
I didn't say not minutes either.
That is true. That is a valid point. But I'm going to go with the list of things that not said would be much longer than the things that were said. All right. So, well, ideally, I wanted Janet to be here because I feel like we should probably formally elect a vice chair, and we should probably formally elect a clerk / secretary. But I also feel like we should have all the members present. So maybe we should hold that. Well, she could, except I'm not sure we can. I don't know if we can do that until she's actually approved.
So in fact, have we passed, and Margaret, this is a question for you as the official parliamentarian or whatever, have we passed the time by which Barry is supposed to have appointed someone and in the absence of his doing so, we can do it?
Well, I think we need to notify him formally, don't we?
Yes. After 60 days of said vacancy, the remaining members shall give written notice of said vacancy to the moderator who, with the remaining member or members, shall, after 1 week's notice, fill such vacancy by roll call vote. A majority of the votes of the officers entitled to vote shall be necessary to such election. So you'd want to give notice.
Yeah, so
Okay, Stan, you want to give notice?
Sure. I'll shoot him an email.
it says the remaining members, so are we all supposed to be on that?
Well, we would all vote. I don't know if we have to be on to send it to Barry.
Yeah, Margaret, I'm looking at your email and you have it in bold, after 60 days of said vacancy. So then after 60 days of said vacancy, the remaining members shall give notice to the moderator.
Oh, okay.
My recommendation would actually be for the members present today. You do have a quorum, so for the members present today to vote to authorize the chair to notify.
Yeah,
and way,
that's what I was going to suggest. Yeah.
I move that we authorize Stan. Oh, so moved, seconded.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Dan? Aye. Motion passes 3-0.
that is
So
progress.
that's the first order. Yeah. So we should probably talk about free cash. I know that Scott Hawkins got back with a rather lengthy response, Margaret, to your to your suggestion on free cash.
Mhm.
I thought Margaret's response was even lengthier than Scott's comment.
Oh my gosh. It might have been, but I'm well rehearsed after implementing these in other towns. So I've got a spiel.
Can I ask Julie, are you, at this point, are you on these communications? So do you know what,
Yes, I
were you
do.
on that back and forth?
I did receive this email about the free
Okay.
cash, Scott's email and Margaret's email.
Okay. So I would ask the group what folks' thoughts are, at least on his comments. I mean, we know how Margaret stands, but what do you guys think about Scott's concerns, and do you feel we need to address them at all?
I thought his primary concern was that we not tie the hands entirely of all future generations in what they do with free cash. And I think Margaret's response boiled down to, these are guidelines.
Right.
Hence, they do not tie the hands inexorably and forever.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any issue on that point, Mike. I think Scott raised it. Margaret answered it. I don't think any of us thought that these were absolute rules. It says they're guidelines on free cash. Scott raised a couple of points that I found a bit interesting, and one of them was on short-term borrowing, but let me pass over that for a minute. And then did he say something about town meeting and keeping things less complicated? Did he say that in here? Maybe not. Maybe I haven't.
He did. He said
Yeah.
something about adding confusion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small funds which need monitoring, policies, tracking, and adding to confusion at town meetings.
Yeah, when I look at the guidelines, yeah, I very much like having the guidelines, but as I read across the top column, operating budget, capital, to fund capital budget, we all know or are learning what those terms mean, but I don't know that the average voter walking in to town meeting really has at a gut level, what does this mean? And because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories on it, it may in fact be a little complex when Stan or somebody else has to get up and say, oh, this is what we're doing, or if a question comes up. I don't know that I could articulate. I mean, like, and it's not critical, Margaret. I love what you're doing for us here. But there's a column that said to OPEB trust fund, but then I somewhere else I found out, maybe it was in the Division of Local Services. I said, oh, that's what that abbreviation means, right? So
Oh, yes, it is an abbreviation.
and of course for you,
Acronym.
you know that, you know, you've been living these terms, and for people that haven't, you know, how do you translate these guidelines to a communication to the voters when they're trying to make a decision on or trying to understand what we're doing with free cash? And, you know, it's, so I think Scott's points there is good. And I don't really understand, maybe somebody, Dennis or somebody else could fill me in on this question of, Scott says what's missing and would have been valuable to him on FinCom is how much do we keep in free cash that would help prevent the need for short-term borrowing and thus save town interest in administrative fees? So does anybody get what he's talking about there? I don't know if
Yeah.
everybody has that.
Yeah. Dennis, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but there is kind of a glitch in this. Dennis, Dennis is the one that has to do short-term borrowing, so.
Well, there's two types. One is in anticipation of revenue if you're short of cash, and it's short term, less than a year or a year, and also in anticipation of paying something short term, like a fire truck over a short period of time. The interest is a lot cheaper than long-term borrowing, as is the cost of setting up that kind of loan.
I get the sense that Scott and Dennis, I think you got a copy of this. I get the sense that Scott's referring to the cash shortfall issues as opposed to the 1-year notes. Is that the sense you got?
Well, yeah, because we probably wouldn't go that far unless we were having a horrible get the bills out year, because we can borrow internally with stabilization. And the only cost on that is loss of interest, which isn't a lot these days. So we have enough money. That's one reason to bring stabilization totals or amounts up when you can, to get them up over that 5% recommended by the state.
Mhm.
The issue with free cash associated with that too is that free cash is required to be appropriated. Regardless, it has to be appropriated. So if we have a cash shortfall, for example, in November, and we haven't already had a town meeting to appropriate free cash to cover cash shortfalls, which I would assume would be put in the operating budget as kind of a recurring use of free cash to cover cash shortfalls, that we can't use free cash. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I think.
So Margaret, that's why you would have, the first column on your guideline here is 2 of the operating. And that's
That
so
would
you
be
don't
the-
have to go to town meeting if for some reason you hit a cash shortfall in your operations. Sorry, go ahead, June, yeah.
You don't
I
need-
think,
Oh, go ahead. You don't need town meeting approval to do borrowing against anticipated revenue or taxes.
But you do need a town meeting vote to appropriate free cash.
Correct.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, June.
I was thinking that, I think Scott was actually talking about physical cash versus free cash. Free cash is just a number versus, I think he was thinking that if we didn't use free cash and kept free cash rolling over, that he's thinking that that would give us actual cash in the bank, so we wouldn't have to borrow money. If that
And
makes
that's not-
sense.
Yeah, and that's not true because
that's
you still
not-
have to appropriate.
Exactly. Well, no, what I'm saying is that he's looking at free cash, I think, as cash on hand. Physical cash on hand is what I think he's saying, so that we don't have to borrow money versus having cash available. It all depends on when the taxes come in as to whether or not we have a cash flow or not. So I think
Yes.
he's looking at it a little bit differently. I mean, maybe in a roundabout way, what he's saying could be true, but normally free cash doesn't have anything to do with whether or not, because like last year, we rolled over all of our free cash, and that doesn't mean that we wouldn't possibly, if everybody spent all their money at one time, we could still come up with a cash shortfall.
Yep.
And have to borrow because taxes haven't come in yet.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I
What you're
think
saying is free cash is not really cash.
correct. It's just a matter, it's kind of like
It is.
when you
It's
have a
not cash on
budget
hand.
and, yeah.
It's a fund.
Well, it's one of those where if you have $100 and you spend 50, you've got $50.
So-
It's kind of the same thing.
So June, if I were to do this in English and not in Massachusetts finance language, this is what's left over at the end of the year.
Bingo.
Thank you.
Yep. It's
So
our
why-
revenue less our
That's
expenses.
great. It's free cash is turned back from many different sources. It's from
Yeah.
unexpended budget lines. It's from one-time revenues that have come in during the course of the prior fiscal year. There's a whole bunch of little bits of money that go into free cash. And the reason it's not considered a recurring funding source, and I think this is one of Scott's concerns, it's one of mine too, is because that you can't guarantee it year
Right.
after year. It's not truly a recurring funding source.
So it's really unexpended
Right.
revenues.
That's a big part of it, the unexpended appropriations.
Well, that, and sometimes we get one-time shortfalls, like if somebody sells their property and their land comes out of chapter land, well, we get a one-time thing, or if Dennis collects a big tax title, we get extra money that year, but that doesn't mean we're gonna get it again.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
there's a lot of things that go into it.
For whatever reason, and maybe it's history, I like to use FEMA reimbursements as an example. So FEMA, when there's a declared emergency, kind of like now, or a natural disaster, the cities and towns will process all this paperwork to get reimbursed through FEMA. Sometimes FEMA takes 2 years to reimburse a municipality's costs. When that money finally comes in, that's dumped into your revenues that year, and it turns into it turns over to free cash the following year. So,
Yep.
but it's one time.
So what is the certification process when we talk about certifying free cash? What does that mean?
June's
June
working on that
or
now.
Dennis?
Pretty much what it is the books get closed out and revenues get dumped in, less expenses, and then a few other things get added into it, and that's what we're left over with. So it's a matter of pretty much excess revenues that come in. We didn't overspend any accounts. People actually didn't spend all of their line items, so that gets rolled back. If people turn back special articles, that can add to it. So it's pretty much, I have to close out the books, everything has to be turned in, yada, 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 and the DOR then comes up.
So I
with a
guess
number.
then I don't understand why it's not really cash, because if it's taking into account the revenues that actually came in, but also then taking into account that things weren't spent, where's the shortfall? Why is whatever is certified not actually sitting there as cash?
Some things are not deducted from our free cash as an expense. So like right now we have expenses that we spent out for COVID that are over and above what we had funding for. So that they won't hit our free cash for it, but technically it's money we've paid out. We also had, at the end of the year, we had a grant, the Green Community Grant. How much was that for? I can't remember now.
48,000.
$48,000. So physical cash went out, but we did not have the revenue to offset that. But that per se doesn't necessarily hit our free cash. So they don't take that into consideration that we paid out 48,000 because we're waiting for the reimbursement. So there's a lot of technical things that also go into it. So it's not actually physical cash. It's just.
So it's almost like having receivables in there, or
Yes.
having.
Yes, because the receivables play into it also.
And
Yep.
it's not available year round. It's not
Sort of
available.
accrual versus sort of cash basis.
Yeah, sort of. Huh?
Not
No.
really, but yeah.
Not really, but okay.
So June, if we find ourselves in a cash flow issue where we have to, given month, we have to put out more than we actually hold, that's where we go to the general stabilization fund of free cash? Is that where we do that?
Yes,
short-term
because
borrowing?
Dennis could actually he could borrow for our tax anticipation. He can also do it if we, like, say we have a big grant that we're going to get reimbursed for. He could actually borrow the physical cash for a grant anticipation. Or if we happen to have enough money in the stabilization fund, then he could actually borrow cash from the stabilization and transfer it into the general fund to be used. So we're pretty much using our own money versus actually having to borrow money.
As long as stabilization is
Is
reimbursed
available.
fully.
Correct. It has to be reimbursed before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so, but Dennis, we don't need a town meeting. That's something that can be done within the town management,
Yes.
Correct.
the
Yeah.
finance team.
Counter approved by the select board.
Okay,
I believe that's what isn't there a special article that says that he's authorized to borrow at
Yes,
town meeting?
in anticipation, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
I want to address to one of Scott's points. We were just starting to talk about this, but that column to the operating budget.
Yes.
Mary, you had a really, really good point. If Scott's concern is to avoid incurring any interest costs on short-term borrowing, which Dennis incurs, although small, from stabilization, the town could develop a strategy to appropriate a certain amount of free cash into the operating budget and specifically to be appropriated in lieu of the short-term borrowing, or to offset the short-term borrowing needs. The one thing I don't know is historically what Dennis has needed to borrow on a short-term basis each year. So that would be
Probably 3 times. And it's the total amount that's in stabilization based on a formula. And it usually comes out the winner. I can't remember what we compare it to. but we've borrowed 1.2 million. We didn't get some money until like December, January.
So it's not really something free cash could plug the hole in for.
Right.
It's not. Okay.
Yeah, so Scott's 2 points in his email, one following the other, the one on the short-term borrowing, the one on using free cash for operations, they're actually in tension with each other, I think. Yeah, that's why I was confused anyway.
Well, it is very good practice to not use free cash on recurring operations cost. It's very good practice. The town has done very well with that. The town has also had revenues available to it, at least in the recent past, that has prevented the town having to use any free cash to fund operations. So, as I explained in my email, it's there. It could be necessary in future lean years. It could also be used for recurring special article things like hot top, like firefighter turnout gear that come back year after year. It could be used for that as well. So I am not, and the administrative finance team is not proposing using $150,000 or up to 10% of free cash to fund the operating budget. We're not. It's there if needed in the future as an option, because it can be an option by according to the Department of Revenue.
Are you suggesting essentially setting it aside so that it could be used? And if it's not used, then it goes back to free cash again.
Exactly. Exactly. And that could be true for any of these buckets.
But that also goes back to Scott's point about creating more buckets that have to be tracked and
Tracked and explained.
explained.
The annual town report could touch in an article about what some of those things are.
Yeah, and the town actually, the only thing on this entire list of things that the town doesn't already have in place is that other post-employment benefits trust fund. The town has everything else in place. The free cash generation, and we can certainly explain that, it's really not advisable to spend out your free cash in any year. You have no base to roll into the coming fiscal year, and if for any reason you are unable to generate free cash to the level that you were the prior fiscal year, you could end up, with a structural deficit. You could end up with a big problem. So free cash generation is just, and like Dennis said, this can be explained in the annual town report. But again, the only category here that the town does not have in place at this point is that OPEB trust fund.
Because keep in mind that I think the big reason why we don't want to put it towards the operating budget is because if we do a budget and all the revenues come in exactly as we budget and all of the budgets are spent down to the penny, then we have no free cash.
Yep. Yep.
So it's one of those where if our revenues come in a little bit shorter than what we expect, and somebody doesn't spend all of their money, that can offset it. So it's not like we have to raise that revenue the following year. So that's why they're saying the operating budget part of it. Some of the special articles that we do, I don't know if people classify that as part of the operating, like the hot top or like a new cruiser. Because usually, well, not the cruiser, but hot top, usually we've been paying for that out of free cash. But if we don't have free cash, it's really not gonna affect the town services if we postpone doing hot top for say 1 year. Versus if we don't have enough free cash to offset the operating budget, it could mean major layoffs or other expenses would have to be cut.
Yeah, the big concern with that is absolutely creating structural deficits.
Yep.
And you don't want to find yourself in that hole year on year.
Well, it seems to me we kind of do this by default by not spending down our free cash.
Mhm.
It seems like we've kind of are establishing this
Yep.
anyway, just not calling it this,
It's not in writing.
right?
What are you saying, Stan, that by not spending down all our free cash as is our habit, then that is actually there for the, to go to operating, the first column in the guidelines?
Well, I think that's what it is addressing all of these other things that we're talking about. I mean, that it's giving us the flexibility to do all of this, all of these other funding mechanisms. And so it's basically accomplishing what that was intended for,
Mhm.
because we're just not spending it all down. So it's sitting there.
It's assuring that you've got a free cash base.
Yep.
It's just that we haven't formalized, what we don't have is a policy that says on any given year, we're going to keep X% of the free cash in there. We just tend to look at all of the articles, all of the things that people are looking to buy, and we look at free cash and we decide whether we think we can live with, 300,000 left or 500,000 left or 700,000 left, depending on what's being asked for. And it's just, I think this formalizes it more, that's all. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and I'm not sure that it actually does what Scott's concerned about. I feel like we're pretty much doing it already. It's just not.
It's pretty much just guidelines to help with new people or to keep people on the same page. And again, if it doesn't work, then we change it.
Yeah, and Dennis, I looked in the financial terms glossary of the last annual report. I've got a town annual report, and yes, free cash is defined, is pretty well defined in that, in the glossary, so it's there. But I think maybe maybe trying to get into Scott's head a little bit and understand his comments, that we may not all have the same vocabulary when we look at the headings on those columns on the
Right.
guidelines, right? And so yeah, I think I think everything that Margaret's put out here makes sense. It definitely makes sense. It's to me more of an issue that I understand it and that I can explain it to somebody else. And it does seem to be consistent, by the way, with what the Division of Local Services put out in the piece that you sent us, Margaret.
That's where I got the idea.
Well, okay. So what do I say? You copy well, Margaret? Huh? Is that
Excuse
what
me?
you're telling me? You copy well?
That's par for the course. But no, DLS puts out really, really very strong and sound financial guidelines, best practices. And, I think it's incumbent upon us to at least consider them for the town's financial health.
And it's one more thing that will help us possibly get a higher credit rating when we buy.
Yes. Yeah.
That's always just-
That and the administrative finance team, we met this morning, June, Dennis, Molly, and I. We talked again about those overall financial management policies, which I can't remember if I circulated those to FinCom last night, kind of sample policies. They're very high level policies on, fraud prevention, debt management, I can't even think of all the stabilization, capital stabilization, the levels you want to keep. But it's multiple pages that I really, our team really wants to get to the finance committee and the select board to start looking over and adopting, because these policies will strengthen the town's bond rating ultimately.
That's good.
Which will save us on interest fees.
Yeah, it's all good. Good.
It used to be that they only based your rating on finances, how the local economy was doing. And then after a major financial crash, back when Romney was around, some states that were AAA went bankrupt. And it was because they didn't have to manage their money. So now when the rating companies look at us, I don't have it in front of me, but it's some large, like 25% of the rating criteria is based on how you manage your town and the written policies that back you up. So this is very important stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. No, clearly I can understand that. Yeah, and I'm glad we're doing these things.
But just also keep in mind they're guidelines only. So if we have a really good year and we want to do something special, we do it. If there's something really bad that happened, then we take that into consideration and we don't put any money anywhere. So I mean, again, it's just a guideline just to give people guidelines as to, you know, what they should be considering versus, you know, if you know, there's a big project and you want to use money for something else, then you do it. You know, it's just,
It's an anchor to adjust from.
Right.
Yeah. And and all of that makes sense. And when I look at the Division of Local Services free cash piece that Margaret sent out, there's as a non-recurring revenue source, free cash should be restricted to paying one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or replenishing other reserves. And so I think that's reflected in the guidelines.
It also talks about limitations on use for operating budgets, I believe, that DLS piece. If it's used, it should be used with caution.
Yeah, avoid supplementing current year department operations. Yes, eliminate that expectation you're going to backfill. Now, the other thing that I noted in this was that it says the community should strive to generate free cash at 3 to 5% of its annual budget. So if you look at Berlin's recent budgets, I think that would take us in the $400,000 to $700,000 category, maybe.
3 to 5%.
Yeah.
700,000, 700,000.
Yeah.
For a $14 million budget, 5% would be 700,000.
Okay, so my math is okay there. So it's 400 to 700,000 as we look at it today. And then you, very, very helpful, Margaret, you provided us with a 10-year certified free cash history.
Yeah.
We're well in the green on that, on those numbers. You know, they're
Last year, FY20, yes. FY21 is going to be the same. And a big reason for FY21 being the same, if not more, is because of the spending freeze we put on. Departments from March to the end of the last quarter, spending was at a minimum. And so we're going to have a lot of money turned back.
and revenue continued to be pretty steady too.
Yeah.
For this past year. So we were pretty lucky as far as people paying taxes and people still doing building permits.
Yes.
And so, yeah, but if it wasn't for the spending freeze, you're not going to see what we have this year ever happen again without that spending freeze.
Well, yeah, but the 2021 was like, wow, that's the 2020 is 1,200,000, right? So, yeah, we've been.
It's another. I guess it's another reason to show. To practice constraints, you know, to actually have this framework to make sure that we don't think that this 1.2 million, whatever this coming year is going to be 1.2, 1.4 million is going to continue. So it would at least keep us within bounds and make sure that we are stabilized moving forward.
And we also have to remember, we're really conservative usually when we guesstimate on the revenues, local receipts and that type of things too. And that helps us a lot.
Well, June, I think that's reflected in this 10-year of history on free cash.
Yeah.
It's definitely reflected there. And, you know, nobody's going to accuse the town of Berlin of spending like a drunken sailor. We don't. You can see it. It's right
On that note, let me,
So I don't know, I think we can ask more directly than like drunken soldiers. So sailors.
let me just add that at representing the what's called the Capital Planning Committee,
Yeah.
There is a great desire that we have some consistency, some notion ahead of time of what the Capital Planning Committee is going to have available. We are trying to develop a 5-year capital plan. but developing that 5-year capital plan also requires that we have some notion of what revenues will be available over that period.
Really good point. And to be able to provide the capital planning committee actual amounts available to them for the current year's capital budget or the coming year's capital budget, or for the 5-year plan, it's going to give them, it's going to give the capital planning committee much more predictability.
So I will say over the past couple of years, we have sort of had a loose guideline for the capital planning committee. Oh, $1 million. But I have no idea what the basis for that is.
Well, see too with that is that you have to look at it as to, okay, where is that money coming from?
Right.
As far as, okay, are you wanted to use, 500,000 from free cash and you want to borrow the other? Or are you going to borrow some and finance some with raise and appropriate? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. It's just a matter of having some sort of a formula to figure out, okay, is this a good year where we can use more free cash versus we may have to raise and appropriate something or borrow it over 2 years so we can afford it?
Yeah, well, I don't think we've been necessarily borrowing. We raise and appropriate and that it becomes part of the budget, yes.
A lot of stuff has been coming out of right now is police, public safety, I
Public
should say,
safety mitigation or whatever.
which is wonderful, and hopefully it will continue.
Last.
But again, it's that whole, just keep in mind where money is actually physically coming from, not just a number per se.
Right. Well, I mean, that's capital planning's concern is that each year we get lots of requests and we're never sure exactly, so how much can we plan to spend?
Yeah.
Last year and the year before, the number was, well, keep it around $1 million.
And last night, I think I broke it to the capital planning committee that it's probably looking more like 850,000 this year. If you look at this to fund the capital budget, the 363, plus say you use, 450,000 or $500,000 of the public safety mitigation fund, you've got yourself about $850,000 just with these two sources.
And just keep in mind when you do a capital project, we have to remember maintenance because we lack a lot when it comes to the maintenance end of whatever we're purchasing or building or
The ongoing.
changing.
Yeah.
Capital projects lately have been things like cutting trees and paving parking lots. Speaking of which, when is the parking lot out in front of Town Hall going to be paved?
Looks like spring. It has to be done in the spring because the grant closes out in June of next year. So I know
That's
Dave's
next year,
working
okay.
diligently on putting together the plan, and it looks like we're going to go out, we're going to procure the work this winter or late
Okay.
fall maybe.
Winter, okay.
So what's the question is, at one point I think we had talked about in finance of having too much money in is there a downside to having too much money in stabilization, Dennis or June?
No, it's unlimited now. I believe they changed it. One of the things I spoke about today was we have a $3.8 million loan that's small compared to what many communities have. And if we could pay it off in 10 years, it would be, at least on the borrowing and paying interest side, a really good thing that we could save for if we up the stabilization with a special stabilization account for that or other things.
Otherwise, that debt service expires when, Dennis?
It's in the 30s, 34.
But in 10 years, it could be paid off.
Correct.
What was it that was supposed to be 5%? There was something I thought that was supposed to be, the guideline was 5% of your budget, of your annual budget. I thought that.
That's what the state says is a minimal that's considered good management.
Yeah.
Doesn't limit you
Okay.
to the amount.
I mean, you don't want to have tons and tons of money in stabilization either if you don't have a plan on spending.
Right.
Because I mean, if you don't need the money, then we don't raise the money.
I think the most we've had was like 1.4 million back in the good old days, but we couldn't have multiple stabilization accounts like you can now.
Right.
All right, so how do we move forward on this?
Well, I think the question is, do we want to accept these guidelines as guidelines that will guide us in the future? Or do we
Right,
want
I
to
mean, so we would
modify
need a
them?
motion, and then we need to decide if we want all of these categories and what percentage we would want to put into them, I guess.
Well, not hearing anybody speaking, I'll move that we adopt the use of certified free cash guidelines as presented by Margaret as guidelines.
Can I just ask one thing before you guys do that?
Sure, I
The,
didn't say that then.
The, where we have a column for OPEB, we don't have OPEB right now, so I don't think we can put any money there, correct?
No, we haven't established the
Okay.
trust fund for OPEB either, so it's not applicable yet.
Okay,
No.
but that is on that guideline sheet,
It
isn't
is.
it?
It
So
is.
that we cannot, I don't know if we want to keep that there or just keep that as a future reference.
Can I suggest, June, that we do it with a we footnote, we take it out as a column and we footnote it and say that when we establish this, that this would be done at not less than 10%?
Yeah, because I mean, I definitely don't want it to go away, because if we ever plan on doing it, then we may have to put more in it to get it started. But we may want to keep that in mind, that if we are going to go that way, then we probably want to put extra money into our regular stabilization fund to help offset that in the future,
Mhm.
if that makes
And
sense.
you would definitely want to get on funding the other post-employment benefits right off the bat.
Exactly.
If these are guidelines, is there any reason we can't have that there and saying when OPEB trust fund when established?
Good.
Well, you're right, Mike, it does say not yet established in that column.
Yeah.
So something like not to be funded until established or something to that effect, or.
Yeah. Because I'm just thinking that type of money should probably be put in regular stabilization. So if and when it comes time, we're not hitting really the taxpayers really hard to bring it up to where it's supposed to be.
So June, regular stabilization would be that column that says general stabilization.
Yeah.
5% to maintain or exceed DOR recommended cash reserves threshold. Okay.
So that
So,
would be
I
a
mean, we-
footnote on that OPEB column now, which says to go to general stabilization until the fund is established.
Right, I was gonna say, we could set general stabilization at 15% if we just wanted to cover
Okay.
that.
Yep. Sorry, didn't want to throw a monkey wrench in, but
No, June, I think that's essential because it was on the page and I didn't notice it, that it didn't exist. We were funding it and it didn't exist.
I think it's in our very near future probably, because we are
Yeah.
one of the few towns that don't have it, but we physically can't do anything with that. So.
Yeah.
Do we, the finance committee, need to propose that so that it can be established?
Question.
We have, Dennis is going to be working with a benefits consultant on the whole retiree health benefits issue. It would have to come to, it would obviously come to the finance committee for a recommendation. It would go to the board for recommendation, probably personnel committee, and then the town meeting would have to vote to establish the trust fund. It's a statute, so town meeting would have to accept that statute.
Okay. So how do we word it now so that you can begin saving for it without it existing? And if you say general stabilization should be 15%, you don't really want it to be 15% in the future.
Yeah, you're right.
Is there a way to word that, Margaret, or could we just footnote it there? I mean, I don't know how that would work.
I think it's going to have to be footnoted. It's going to be really, it's going to be, it's going to have to be memorialized somehow that the intent here is to fund general stabilization until, or to put that money into general stabilization until such time an OPEB fund is established. So we're going to have to somehow memorialize that.
So if you eliminate that column, you can in the general stabilization column say 5 to 15%, until the establishment of the OPEB trust fund, in which case, and this is getting to be a long footnote, longer than the column, in which case the 10% goes back over there.
We'll find a way.
Right,
to
you
agree.
could just say unless and until.
Unless and until the OPEB is established. Okay. So we'll make sure that it's defined. We'll make sure that it's defined in that column. I'll update the draft and send it out to all of you so you can look at it and decide if it looks okay.
So we're not going to adopt it tonight.
Until.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the other thing was, I'd like to look at would be the percentages before to decide whether we want to adjust these at all. Do we want to keep this other column? What do we think about, creating another stabilization fund? Because we're talking about both capital and then adding to general stabilization. So, do we think that having a capital stabilization is the way to go, or can that just be addressed through general stabilization?
So the town meeting adopted the capital. They established a capital stabilization fund at annual town meeting.
Funded it with $4,100.
Yeah.
$4,100. The capital planning committee had initially wanted to put $125,000 in that. The capital stabilization fund, the way the article was worded was to fund items that are qualified for borrowing under Mass General Law, Chapter 44. So we're talking big items. So if you put some sort of baseline, I think it's baseline goal, $250,000, that can be used to fund larger capital items typically. So you could use it to offset some debt service costs. You could use it to purchase a ladder truck. You could,
Next
so
time
big
you buy a
things,
fire truck.
big things, buy land, who knows? So that was the purpose of capital stabilization, establishing that specifically for large capital purposes.
Okay, so if we add up the percentages and, it basically adds up to 100. But do we want to keep this other column?
So I had the other, that's a really good point, Stan, because you could do something with the operating and the other column to combine the two or something like that so that you could pay. You typically fund your snow and ice deficit from free cash in the spring anyway. So you would, that other column could incorporate the snow and ice. It could incorporate other special articles that we were talking about earlier, recurring special articles. So you could condense those columns.
I had that.
We could also, sorry, go ahead.
I had the same thought, Stan, on that do they really need to be distinct?
Well, I guess from my personal standpoint, I would just as soon see a larger percentage on free cash generation or on general stabilization rather than other. So I personally would like to see that 15 either added to general stabilization and make that 20, or divide it between that and free cash. But to me, those are the two important categories for me about this keeping money available, which is a big reason of, it's a big purpose of free cash. So, and, not spending it down.
Mm-hmm.
Let me argue against that and saying that since general stabilization requires a 2/3 town meeting vote to spend it, I worry about locking up everything. And if you look at these things, that there are 1, 2, not more than 150 or 10%. So 10% up to 30%, that's 40%. Okay, so there's 40%, which is not less than, which is not more than, and then there is 10, 20, 40%, which is not less than, we've got a bunch of not less thans and not more thans. I kind of like having the flexibility to use to use some of it, which is what the 15% in other gives you. Although you can
Well,
argue
I
against it
kind
by
of also
saying
thought
they're
that
in the
this, like we've
guidelines.
talked about, these are guidelines. I mean, this is where flexibility is always in there, isn't it? I mean, other than,
Absolutely.
So, Mike, to your point, the two categories that require 2/3 town meeting vote are the two stabilization funds. And so if you look at the first two columns, operating budget, capital budget, I don't see a 2/3 town meeting vote required.
No, I just, Stan was suggesting putting it in general stabilization, moving that up to 20 or something, or 15. And I'm saying that the problem is that really ties our hands.
So I agree, Mike. I'd rather see it moved into the capital budget or the operating budget out of other, because ultimately other is going to fall likely into one of those two.
Yeah.
And, you know, Stan, you could always decide to put, what is this, stabilization? One says not less than 10, the other says 5%. You could always put more in. We don't have a ceiling on the stabilization funds.
well, no, but I mean, the point of establishing guidelines is just trying to set programmatic plan for what we want to do about stabilization. So, and well, or any of these for that matter, but it just $60,000 towards stabilization doesn't feel like enough.
I agree.
So here's a
So, I mean,
thought.
maybe we make that 10 and we put the other 10% from the other, divide, do 5 of it into capital stabilization and 5 of it into operating, or, make that. So we're talking about make operating up to 15. And then we say to capital stabilization, not less than 15. And we say to general stabilization, 10, and we just eliminate the other.
Mhm.
So the operating column is essentially the other. It's the other column.
Other column, okay.
It's the other column.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because I mean, as explained there, I mean, it sounds like those are similar type things.
In that case, if the committee wants to consider that, I would, in fact, I think I'm going to suggest this anyway. Well, under where it says to operating, it says balance next year's next fiscal year's budget. I would suggest striking that completely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't like that terminology either.
Okay, I'll strike it.
Yeah, especially including recurring non-capital special article funding like hot top, building maintenance, or master plan updates.
Or snow and ice deficits.
Or
Exactly.
snow and ice deficit.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, too, if you didn't want to segregate it as to be spent, you could also increase to leave more in the free cash generation for the next year too.
Yes.
And that way there, you're not earmarking it anywhere else. And that way there, it's available to do any of the other things, with it. And it doesn't per se, other than a town meeting vote. And that way there, you don't actually have to say.
I'm sorry, Jim, could you do that again?
You know how we have the free cash generation where we're going to leave 20% in to make next year's free cash?
Yeah.
You could increase that one if you wanted to, instead of spending it. That way there, you're
Yep.
saying, okay, we're going to save, I don't know, 25%. Instead of moving.
But not tied to the 2/3 spending or 2/3
Exactly,
vote.
because that way there, you're not saying, okay, we have to spend
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
percentage on either the capital budget or the operating budget, where you can just say, we don't want to spend it. So we're just going to save it and it'll become free cash next year for whatever projects we want to work on. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So that way there, you're not earmarking it and saying it has to be spent or it has to be transferred.
Yeah. And I actually kind of like the 2/3 voting thing, because I feel like that does make us not be drunken sailors.
Yeah, and that means the majority of the town wants whatever it is we're buying or doing.
That's right. That's right. You know, I think I like, I know these are guidelines, so you're talking about percentages. I like the idea, I like June's idea of retaining more in the free cash base to generate for next year's free cash. I also like the idea of increasing the contribution to general stabilization more. So,
Yeah.
however, the finance committee wants to shift those, it works. That's why they're guidelines.
Margaret, just for fun, do you have any idea how much we normally would do in each of these things? Like a percentage of our free cash was spent for operating, or a percentage was for capital? I don't know if we have ever actually looked to see what past practices were.
I'd have to go back and look at the spending history, because this year, this was my first budget cycle, and it was
It
totally,
wasn't a normal year.
it was not a normal, it was not a normal
It
year.
better not be a normal year.
Yeah, or
I don't
June's
want another
leaving.
one like this. No, but we can certainly take a look at that, and that can help shape the
'Cause I'm just
allocations.
thinking normally free cash in the past, we've done it with mostly what, Dennis, offsetting like special articles?
Right.
Because we haven't done a lot of borrowing. I mean, one year I think we did a lot more than we did in the past of raise and appropriates. So, I mean, the past few years, we've actually been turning back substantial amounts, I think, in free cash. We haven't been like spending it all. That's one of the reasons why I think we're just seeing some of our free cash roll.
Yeah, and this year, what we turned back because of the deferred capital expenditures, we turned back about $845,000. So
Yeah.
that's all generating to the coming year's free cash. So
Versus us saying, okay, we have to spend this. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah. So again, it's guidelines only.
yeah,
So with that in mind, I would say even like this year, we may decide we want to put extra money, not change this, but we may decide we want to put 20% in stabilization to help us stabilize the taxes next couple of years if, you know, all of this finally catches up with us. But that doesn't mean we're going to be doing that every year. So again, guidelines.
Yes.
that is the word of the night. Guidelines.
Margaret, you are going to revise this chart?
Yeah, I've marked it up so I can redline it and send it out to you. You can take a look at it and
Excellent.
comment. Mark it up more.
Speaking of hot top, I've noticed as I've walked around the past 2 days that there are all sorts of places marked where they're going to patch. Have we decided to do more hot top?
I saw them doing hot top actually on at the end of Carter the other day. So they might be in process of doing some of it.
I was going to
Okay.
say, I saw a lot of dotted white lines all over the roads today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A whole bunch has appeared within the past 2 days. Dave must know something that we don't know.
We're not going to start cutting down all the dead trees that I'm seeing around.
Well, guess
That's the
what?
next thing.
If the finance committee supports a recommendation to a special town meeting in the fall on the contract tree removal, they can get going on that.
Yeah. All right, so you're waiting on action from us on that then, Margaret?
Well, if you want to just hold off, I can send you back a draft, a redlined version of this, and you can look at it next time if you'd prefer to do that.
Yeah, I guess I was also shifting gears. Are you asking us for our support on a special town meeting as well?
Oh, special town meeting, yes.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we, we have a motion on the floor at this point for this.
No, I withdrew it.
Okay.
No motion.
All right, well then, with that understanding that Margaret is going to make some adjustments to this and send it out for our next meeting, so that our next topic should be special town meeting, you think then?
Sounds good to me, if you're asking me.
I am asking you.
There are so many, so for special town meeting, I have proposed the date of November 30th to the board. It's a Monday night. Big part of that is Eloise getting through that major election and the time, and Dennis, and the time period that follows that for
An election?
certificate. Excuse me?
There's an election?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
With any luck,
Election
yeah.
I've never seen. So anyway, I proposed November 30th. There were a lot of deferred bylaw articles, particularly from the planning board. So you got a bunch of zoning bylaw amendments that will potentially come up, a few general bylaws. But I'll tell you what I'll do for your next meeting is I'll get you, I've given the board, unless I already did, I've given the board kind of an outline, just a listing of potential articles, and I could send that off to you so you can at least take a first look at what might be coming for special.
That would be good. So we should also establish what we should set when our next meeting is going to be.
Yeah,
I
there,
think
you know, Stan, on our posted agenda, there's an item that says set meeting calendar for the year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just guessed at that.
Okay.
No,
Oh, okay.
that's fine. We should definitely do it. So,
That's what I thought.
yeah. I mean, this time of year in the past has not required more than one meeting a month, at least up through December. Other than if there was a time we also had to get together with select board.
This year, we're looking at bumping up that budget request submission deadline to November 27th. We're looking at bumping up everything about a month. Unless FinCom wants to move it back a little bit, back to December, but
I mean, I don't see any reason that we need to move it back. I mean, we can move it up to October 1st as far as I'm concerned, but.
oh gosh, no.
For what? For what? Special
No.
town meeting?
No.
No,
No, not until free cash is certified. You can't have a town meeting.
the budget request.
Oh,
Stan, I do only show you for one meeting in October, one meeting in November. The one thing that we would need before the budget request, well, we would need from the Finance Committee, let me see here. We're gonna need some sort of, I think the Finance Committee typically does a memo or something to departments, boards, and committees on kind of budget guidelines. I can pull up a prior years if you want to look at that. June,
Yeah, that would be
that's-
helpful to me.
Yeah,
yeah, usually it's just a budget overview as to what you're expecting from people and possibility of, you know, whether it be level funding or you want it itemized zero-based budgets or, you know, 2% increases, any of that type of stuff. And if you want different types of forms, that was the other thing. Now Margaret does the most of that.
Well, I mean, this sounds like this is a good opportunity for us to start changing this process if we want to, I don't know, get into the year 2020, since we haven't really been with the budget process with our reams of paperwork. But I think we'll still be stuck with all the paperwork at this point. But
We're getting into 2022 now, aren't we?
well,
Yeah,
I just
unfortunately. But we all knew what
2020,
Stan meant, yeah.
it really meant 2020. Let's get to 2020.
We are
It'd be nice to
skipping
get that one
2020.
straightened out.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, let's get through 2020 quickly.
That's right.
Okay, so are we selecting a date?
Well, I think, yeah. So, I mean, I had pushed this off last week, so it ended up being the third Wednesday. So I think we had it at the second Wednesday. I will not be in town the second Wednesday in October, so I think we should push it again to the third Wednesday.
which would be the 21st of October.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess then I am here I would be here for the second Wednesday. If
That
it
would
made
be
more
the
sense for us to
14th.
meet on the 14th, then we could do that.
On the 14th.
14th is okay, Stan? Yeah.
Yeah, 14th. I'm gone 3rd through the 10th, and I didn't really realize exactly when it fell.
Yep.
As far as Wednesdays went.
So are we
Just
gonna
seemed
set
like
it
it would
to
be the second
14th?
one. Yes, please.
Margaret, are we going to need anything for the budget packages then, before then, or are we going to be all set to start putting them together? Because normally we
We're gonna
hand them
be all
out.
set.
in-
If FinCom could get its memo done that night, we'd be okay, because it's right after that the budget packages would be finalized
Because
Okay.
when were you handing them out this year?
with the accountant. I'm handing them out on the 26th. We're handing them out on the 26th.
No, that's Thanksgiving. November 26th is
No,
Thanksgiving.
October 26th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, October 26th, we're handing them out.
All right, well, Margaret, if you had the example of what we did in the past, if you could forward that to me, I'm sure that I would put something together for review by the
Okay.
committee for our next meeting.
Okay.
Hey, Stan, it is possible that I will either be in Colorado or driving back from Colorado on the 14th. Just possible.
Okay.
I don't know for sure when yet.
All right, well,
If
let's
you-
do this. Let's plan on the 14th, and if we need to change it, we can change it. I mean, we changed it last time, day of, so.
Hopefully Julie will actually be a member by then. And-
Yeah,
and-
that's
and
true.
Then you don't need me.
Right. You
You don't
could do
get out
that
of
for
any
next
meetings,
meeting.
Michael, until you're done. Yeah, sorry.
Mike, we need you. We need you,
I-
Mike. We really
I'll
do.
call in from the road if I can.
Yes.
I was going to elect you vice chair just to force you to serve some obligation here until you were.
No,
So just a recommendation, at your next meeting, you're giving the moderator notice. So at your next meeting, you'll probably want to put on your agenda to elect finance committee member by roll call vote,
Yes, yes.
according to bylaw.
How's Buzz doing? Is he still on the committee or did he resign too?
He is not. No, his term ended in the spring, and he elected not to continue. But he's doing well. He has no. It doesn't seem like he has any real long-term or lasting effects, but he's definitely trying to slow things down a little bit.
We saw him at town meeting, Molly.
Yes.
Yeah, he was there. He was doing well.
Oh, good.
he was in good spirits.
Do you want to set a November meeting date as well tonight, or do you want to wait till October to do that?
Do we need just one meeting in November? Is that, were you starting to say, Margaret, we might need more than one, or is it just
I
one?
think one in November would actually be fine. In December, you're really going to kick it into high gear.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we're pushing this up a month, right? I mean, it sounds like we will have pushed our calendar up. So before where we were busier in January, now we would be busier in December.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if we pick a date, it'll go on the calendar and there's a better chance I'll be available.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's
I will
the
tell you
second
that
Wednesday in
this-
November?
It's the 11th.
Oh, that's a
I
holiday.
will definitely not be available then.
Okay,
I will be virtually in Amsterdam. I'll actually be here in Berlin, but I will be in meetings in Amsterdam all day.
okay.
That's nice.
Indeed. The next Wednesday is the 18th.
Yeah,
Yeah, which would not be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so that should be fine.
so Thanksgiving should
I
be.
think we should set the 18th.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we want it, yeah.
And you'll be
Okay.
able to review all the special town meeting articles that night too.
Right,
Good,
right.
18th.
okay. Mary, are you still here? Not, Mary A, not Mary P.
Ah,
I am. if you guys are meeting Wednesday, the 14th, or Mike, you'd have to use your Zoom account because it's booked. Although Molly, it's the assessors at 6.
Molly, do you think the assessors would take an hour and a half?
Molly,
Either
will you
way.
be done?
I could do it on my own Zoom account. That's fine too.
Okay,
if
I'm just
needed.
worried that I may be on the road and not be able to do it, but
So the 14th and then the 18th of November at 7:30.
Is the 18th of November booked too, Mary?
No, that looks like it's free, as far as I can
Okay.
tell.
Okay.
It usually doesn't take my board that long.
So if they
To
can
do-
really get off by 7:15 so that FinCom can assemble in that room. So 6 to 7:15.
That should be fine. I also approached the board on changing their meeting night since Wednesday's so packed.
Oh.
Mary, you
Huh?
might want to tentatively book finance for every Wednesday from December through March.
I can do that, but you have
proactively.
personnel and you have ZBA, so I don't know that I can even do that at this point, but I'll look.
Okay.
Unless we want to use your account on a regular basis and set that up as a recurring Wednesday night booking through your account.
We can always use my account as backup.
Well, that way the number stays the same for the for the meeting credentials.
see.
Could be
Oh, I
exactly
see.
the
Okay.
same.
Okay. All right. One way or another, we'll get these meetings in.
Yay.
Hmm.
So do we have any other business?
Only through the chair. The only other thing I wanted to mention was that the select board expressed an interest in discussing with the regional school district a few things in the regional school district agreement. Jeff, the superintendent, has expressed his willingness to discuss them, in a larger group setting with Boylston and their legal counsel. But we have had, and this is something else Dennis could speak with. There are a few sections, one section in particular that affects the timing of the capital assessment billing affects our cash flow. And we have experienced cash flow issues. The school's been really good about working with us to adjust the timeline. But because we anticipate that this is going to be a continuing problem with the timeline the way it is, we'd like to address the issue in the agreement and actually memorialize some sort of change that alleviates our cash flow issues. The other thing is, let's see, the timing of the budget. Now, according to the agreement, the school district does not have to give the town a final budget until their hard deadline would be March 19th. And after the school district adopts their budget, the district's treasurer has 30 days after that in which to certify the adoption and notify the municipal treasurers, which would bring us, if they stuck to that timeline, it would bring us to 15 days prior to our annual town meeting.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so we want to, I think the board would be interested in discussing maybe adjusting that. So I just wanted to bring that to FinCom's attention because they're finance related issues. That's all I got.
Okay. All right, well, I don't have anything else on my agenda at this point. Mary, are you comfortable adjourning, or are you?
I think we just have our next two meetings and we'll be setting more after that, right?
Yeah, so my action items are to reach out to Barry, give him notification, and to look for the boilerplate announcement for the budget package, and get that so that we have something to look at for next meeting.
We'll get that.
I can send you a copy of that, Stan.
Oh, thank you, Jim.
the whole
Lovely,
Package.
All right.
lovely.
And I'll redline the guidelines and get you the list of possible special town meeting articles.
Okay.
All righty. Well, I would move to adjourn then. Well, can I move to, or do I need a member to move to adjourn?
Well,
Mary-
I'll move. I'll move.
Mary's
to
waving at us. Mary, are you just saying
Oh,
goodbye?
yeah, Mary.
No, just real quick question. Do you want emails to go from a shared FinCom account to all, since there's membership flux? Would that keep everybody in the loop better to simultaneously get finance committee emails? Because we're starting to do that with some of our boards and committees. Instead of us hunting and pecking and sending it to each of you individually, to have our IT guys share in equal measure. Because a chairman is not a, special, it's a ceremonial post, but everyone
Right.
is entitled to the communication live time. So if you were
Yeah.
interested in that, we've been telling some other boards and committees that instead of having it dump into your own personal email account, to establish a separate free Gmail account, let's say, for everything to go in there, and that way you keep your life separate from personal business. The town doesn't buy everybody a personal, a town issued email account because it costs on a monthly basis to cloud storage everything. So like the library trustees, for example, Charlene and now Lynette Wheeler have established separate free Gmail accounts that they call themselves Lynette Trustee or Charlene Trustee at gmail.com. And that's where they've been sending all their library business to, for example. But then when you send something to the library trustees, they all get it at the same time. Is that something you guys might be interested in or thinking about discussing?
So
Mike,
Yeah,
you
I
look
mean,
confused.
I'm a little confused. I know that when Margaret sent out the notification before the last meeting saying you were possibly going to be late, and I said I was going to have to cancel anyway. I noticed on that string it just said that you sent it to town finance.
Yeah,
So did you all get that notification?
I don't think finance committee members have linked their emails to finance yet.
So I've got something that's called Finance Committee when I send emails. I just don't know where it goes exactly. I assumed it was
Probably
everywhere.
nowhere. No, there's been lots of different attempts to create committee email accounts, but the thing is, it's always been tied to one person, usually the chairman, to access it, versus this would be more of a way to everyone to get the email at the same time. So our IT guy would have everything that flows into, let's say, FinCom at townofberlin.com simultaneously, immediately go out to everybody, so you can all see it.
So I do have something called FinCom Town of Berlin, FinCom at Gmail.
Yeah,
And-
but I don't know that anybody's manning all these accounts, so we want to slim them down, make sure that they're active accounts, but also put them to their highest use, which is making sure that all the members,
I don't want to have another email address that I need to monitor, because I've got
Would
four
you-
of them I monitor now.
or you could opt for those emails to flow right into your
Forward.
personal email account.
Right.
You
That's
can
what I
pick
want.
whatever one you personally want to use. Or would that be something where you all would want to see incoming finance committee email hit you all at the same time?
I
I
think,
assume that happened now.
Mary, I think that's the goal. You want everybody to see everything at the same time.
Yeah.
How you execute
Yeah.
on it is an IT question, and I'm with Mike. I also have 4 personal email accounts,
Mhm.
and yes, I'd have to monitor a 5th. It doesn't bother me to mix
No.
the town business with personal, but
Okay.
some people it might be problematic. I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody there.
No. So if individual members wanted to go to their personal account, we would just tell the IT guys that when something comes to FinCom it goes to
Right.
whatever one each of you pick.
Yeah.
But is that
Yeah.
something you'd be interested in?
I
And if so,
personally
what
think
email
that-
address?
I think if it makes sure that we all get the same notice at the same time, the same message, then it's a worthy goal.
And you would want the Porter email address used,
Yeah, the same address that I communicate now.
the non-work one. And Stan, do you,
Just my Gmail account, my S. Rogolinsky Gmail account.
and Mike?
Yes, similarly. I just sent an email to the FinCom at Gmail account to see who gets it. And all I said in it was, please reply if you got this.
It's not at Gmail, it'd be at townofberlin.com.
Yeah, this one was at Gmail. I think it was, well, I don't know whether it's a Gmail or Town of Berlin.
And then I can ask Janet. And then Julie?
Molly?
Yes.
FinCom at
and-
townofberlin.com.
Gotcha.
Julie's,
But
That'll work, probably.
What I was gonna say though is that with Gmail, when you take your username, you can then do plus with
Or
the term.
.gov.
And then it makes it, this is something that I do, so I would just like to use my name plus FinCom at Gmail. And then when that's coming in, I can set up my email to filter.
I just wanted to get the sense of what you were thinking, because when you're appointed, I would touch base with
Yeah.
you then. But yeah,
Okay.
you would want a separate account, and that's your prerogative, so you could set that up.
But well, no, it'd be actually using my account, but when they
Or you
put in,
segregate it.
but when they put the name in, you can do this, your Gmail
Oh.
name plus, I do this sometimes when you have to fill out a form and you
Ah.
want to see if they're going to use your name, like
Oh,
on a mailing list. Because if like, you go to a store and they say, we need your email, like put your name plus the name of the store or something. And then if you start getting lots of emails, you're like, oh, that's where it came from.
gotcha. Oh, that's cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. It's one of these cool features that I don't know how I found out about it.
No. Well, it's good to hear. I will probably start using that myself. Okay, I just wanted to get a sense of you all.
Okay.
Dan or Mary, did either of you just get my email?
I did not, no.
Let me just take a look.
Oh, yeah.
Just, if you get it sent to your personal email, that's town business, and if the town ever gets a request for public records, they're gonna pull all your emails.
Thank you, Molly. That is, yeah, it's part of the public records law. I think that's part of the thing with trying to link the private email addresses to FinCom, so you can filter them into FinCom, and that way we have some sort of public records retention.
Right.
All right, everybody, I'm going to sign out. I'm going to
Yeah,
thank you very much, and I'll get you the red line and the list of articles,
Have we
okay?
adjourned?
we are adjourned.